Joseph was the 11th son of Jacob, born in his father's old age. Jacob loved him more than his other sons, which would soon cause many deep family problems. To show his great affection, Jacob gave Joseph a special gift. It was a beautiful long-sleeved coat of many colors, a symbol of his favor and the boy's status. Joseph had two powerful dreams that he shared with his family. In the first dream, his brothers' sheaves of wheat bowed down to his own sheaf in the field. In his second dream, the sun, moon, and 11 stars all bowed down to him. This dream further suggested his future authority over his entire family, including his parents. His brothers listened to these dreams with growing jealousy and anger. They resented his special coat and now his visions of ruling over them, fueling their already deep-seated hatred. They mockingly called him the Dreamer, scorning his visions of grandeur. Their envy grew stronger each day, and they began to plot how they could get rid of him. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers. They were tending the flocks far away in a place called Shechem, giving them the perfect opportunity to act. When they saw Joseph approaching from a distance, their hatred boiled over. "Here comes the dreamer," they sneered, deciding this was their chance to finally stop his dreams. They conspired to kill him and throw his body into a deep, empty pit. They planned to tell their father that a wild animal had devoured their younger brother. However, Reuben, the eldest brother, felt a pang of guilt. He suggested they just throw him into the pit alive, secretly planning to rescue him later and return him safely. When Joseph arrived, his brothers violently attacked him. They ripped the beautiful, colorful coat from his back, a symbol of the special love he would no longer enjoy. They followed Reuben's suggestion and threw him into the empty cistern. There, Joseph was left alone in the darkness, abandoned by the very people who should have protected him. Shortly after, a caravan of Ishmaelite merchants traveling to Egypt passed by. Judah, another brother, had an idea that would change the original violent plan they had made. Judah suggested they sell Joseph as a slave instead of killing him. This way, they would profit from their crime and avoid having his blood on their own hands. The brothers agreed to this new plan. They pulled a terrified Joseph out of the pit and sold him to the traveling merchants for 20 pieces of silver currency. The merchants took Joseph with them on their long journey down to Egypt. He was now a slave, far from his home and his loving father, facing an uncertain future. To cover up their terrible deed, the brothers dipped Joseph's coat in goat's blood. They needed a believable story to tell their grieving father when they returned home. They presented the torn and blood-stained coat to their father, Jacob. He immediately recognized it and concluded that a ferocious wild animal had tragically killed his beloved son, Joseph. Jacob was completely overcome with grief and sorrow. He mourned for Joseph for many days, refusing all comfort from his family, believing his favorite son was gone from his life forever. Meanwhile, the Ishmaelites arrived in Egypt and sold Joseph again. He was purchased by Potiphar, who was the captain of the Pharaoh's personal guard, a very powerful official. In Potiphar's house, Joseph proved to be hardworking and trustworthy. God was with him, and everything he did was successful, bringing great prosperity to the entire household he managed. Potiphar saw that Joseph was blessed and capable. He was so impressed that he placed Joseph in charge of his entire household and all of his personal business affairs. Joseph was handsome, and Potiphar's wife soon began to notice him. She tried to seduce him, asking him to lie with her, but Joseph firmly refused her advances. He told her he could not betray his master's trust or sin against God. He was determined to remain righteous, even under intense and persistent daily temptation from her. One day, she grabbed his cloak, trying to force him. Joseph fled from her, leaving his garment behind in her hand as he ran out of the house. Feeling scorned and angry at his rejection, she decided to get revenge. She used the cloak he left behind as false evidence to support a terrible lie against him. She falsely accused Joseph of attempting to assault her. She claimed he ran away only after she screamed for help, presenting the cloak as proof of her fabricated story. When Potiphar came home, his wife told him the lie. He was filled with rage, and believing her story, had Joseph arrested and thrown into the royal prison. Even in prison, Joseph's integrity and leadership skills shone through. The warden saw that God was with Joseph, causing everything he did to prosper, just as Potiphar had before. The prison warden soon put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners. Joseph was given great responsibility, managing the daily affairs of the entire prison with complete trust. While Joseph was in prison, two of Pharaoh's officials were also incarcerated. They were the royal cupbearer and the royal baker, and they had offended the king of Egypt. One night, both the cupbearer and the baker had very troubling dreams. They were distressed because they did not know the meaning of the strange visions they had seen. Joseph noticed their sadness the next morning and asked them what was wrong. They told him about their dreams and their frustration at having no one to interpret them. Joseph, trusting in God's wisdom, told them that interpretations belong to God. He then offered to listen to their dreams and help them understand what the visions might mean. The cupbearer went first, describing his dream of a vine with 3 branches. The branches budded, blossomed, and produced grapes, which he then squeezed into Pharaoh's cup to serve. Joseph interpreted the dream as a positive sign for the cupbearer. He explained that in 3 days, Pharaoh would restore him to his former position as his trusted cupbearer. Joseph then made a heartfelt plea to the cupbearer. He asked him to remember him and mention his case to Pharaoh when he was released, hoping for his own freedom. Next, the baker shared his dream. He dreamed of 3 baskets of white bread on his head, but birds came and ate the bread from the top basket. Joseph's interpretation for the baker was grim and unfortunate. He explained that in 3 days, Pharaoh would have the baker executed and his body hung on a tree. 3 days later, on Pharaoh's birthday, Joseph's interpretations came true. The cupbearer was restored to his position, but the baker was executed, just as Joseph had foretold. Despite his promise, the cupbearer was so happy to be free that he completely forgot about Joseph. Joseph remained in prison for 2 more long years, his hope fading. Then, Pharaoh himself had 2 very disturbing dreams that no one could interpret. He dreamed of 7 fat cows being eaten by 7 thin cows that came from the river. In his second dream, he saw 7 healthy heads of grain being devoured by 7 thin, scorched heads of grain. The dreams left him deeply troubled and confused. Pharaoh called for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. He told them his dreams, but none of them could provide a satisfactory interpretation of their strange meaning. It was at this moment that the royal cupbearer finally remembered Joseph. He told Pharaoh about the young Hebrew man in prison who had accurately interpreted his own dream. Pharaoh immediately sent for Joseph. He was quickly brought out of the dungeon, shaved, and given clean clothes to wear before he was presented to the powerful king. Pharaoh told Joseph about his troubling dreams. Joseph listened carefully and explained that God was revealing to Pharaoh what was about to happen to the land of Egypt. The 2 dreams, Joseph explained, had the same meaning. They were a divine message. The 7 fat cows and healthy grain represented 7 years of great abundance and prosperity. The 7 thin cows and scorched grain represented 7 years of severe famine. This famine would be so devastating that it would consume all the abundance from the previous years. Joseph advised Pharaoh to find a wise and discerning man. This man should be put in charge of a plan to collect and store food during the good years. He proposed that 1/5 of all the harvest during the 7 years of plenty should be collected. This grain should be stored in cities under Pharaoh's direct control. This stored grain would then serve as a reserve for the land. It would be used to feed the people during the 7 years of famine that were sure to follow. Pharaoh and his officials were very impressed with Joseph's wisdom and his plan. They recognized that the Spirit of God was with him, giving him unique insight and understanding. Pharaoh decided that Joseph was the most discerning and wise man in all of Egypt. He was the perfect person to carry out the plan he had just proposed. So, Pharaoh appointed Joseph to be in charge of his entire palace. He declared that all the people of Egypt would submit to Joseph's command and his authority. Pharaoh gave Joseph his own signet ring as a symbol of his new power. He also dressed him in fine linen robes and put a gold chain around his neck. Joseph was made the second most powerful man in all of Egypt. Only Pharaoh himself held a higher rank. He was effectively the vizier, managing the entire kingdom. Joseph was given an Egyptian name, Zaphenath-Paneah. Pharaoh also gave him a wife named Asenath, who was the daughter of the priest of On, a prominent figure. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh. He traveled throughout the land of Egypt, beginning the massive task of preparing for the coming famine. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced incredible harvests. Joseph gathered and stored up enormous quantities of grain, so much that it was like the sand of the sea. He stored the grain in cities across the land. The amount was so vast that they eventually stopped keeping records of it because it was simply beyond any measure. During this time, Joseph and his wife Asenath had 2 sons. He named the first son Manasseh, which means, "God has made me forget my troubles and my father's house." He named his second son Ephraim. This name means, "God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering," acknowledging his blessings despite his past hardships and trials. After the 7 years of abundance came to an end, the predicted famine began. It spread over all the surrounding lands, just as Joseph had foretold it would. But in all the land of Egypt, there was bread. This was because of Joseph's wise planning and the vast stores of grain he had collected during the plentiful years. When the Egyptian people began to cry out to Pharaoh for food, he directed them to Joseph. He told them to do whatever Joseph instructed them to do. Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians. The famine was severe, and people from all over the world started coming to Egypt to buy food. The famine was also severe in the land of Canaan, where Jacob and his family lived. Jacob heard there was grain in Egypt and decided to send his sons there. Jacob sent 10 of his sons to Egypt to buy grain. However, he kept his youngest son, Benjamin, at home because he was afraid that some harm might come to him. The 10 brothers traveled to Egypt and appeared before Joseph to buy food. As the governor of the land, Joseph was the one personally overseeing the sale of grain. When his brothers arrived, they bowed down before him with their faces to the ground. They had no idea that this powerful Egyptian official was the brother they had sold. Joseph immediately recognized his brothers, but he pretended not to know them. He spoke harshly to them, accusing them of being spies who came to see the land's weaknesses. They denied his accusation, explaining they were honest men from one family. They told him they were 12 brothers, but one was gone, and the youngest was with their father. Joseph decided to test them to see if they had changed. He put them in prison for 3 days, adding to their fear and confusion in this foreign land. On the 3rd day, he released them but kept one brother, Simeon, as a hostage. He told the others they could not return for more food unless they brought Benjamin. Joseph secretly had his servants fill their sacks with grain. He also ordered that the silver they had paid for the grain be returned to their sacks without them knowing. The brothers returned to Canaan and told their father, Jacob, everything that had happened. They were shocked and frightened when they found the silver returned in their sacks of grain. Jacob was devastated by the news. He refused to let Benjamin go to Egypt, fearing he would lose another son after already losing Joseph and now having Simeon held captive. But the famine grew worse, and their food ran out again. Judah promised his father he would personally guarantee Benjamin's safety, finally convincing Jacob to let him go with them. The brothers returned to Egypt, this time with Benjamin. They also brought double the silver and special gifts to present to the powerful Egyptian ruler who held their fate. When Joseph saw that his brother Benjamin had come with them, he was deeply moved. He instructed his steward to prepare a great feast for the men at his home. The brothers were terrified when they were taken to Joseph's house. They thought they were going to be punished for the silver they had found in their sacks. They met Joseph's steward and explained what had happened. The steward reassured them, telling them not to be afraid, and then brought their brother Simeon out to them. Joseph arrived, and they presented their gifts, bowing before him. He asked about their father's well-being, and was overcome with emotion upon seeing his full brother Benjamin again. He had to leave the room to weep in private. After composing himself, he returned and ordered the feast to be served. The brothers were seated in order of age. During the feast, Joseph gave Benjamin a portion of food that was 5 times larger than anyone else's portion, showing him special favor in testing his brother's reactions. After the meal, Joseph planned one final, dramatic test. He instructed his steward to place his personal silver cup into the sack of the youngest brother Benjamin. The next morning, as the brothers were leaving the city, Joseph sent his steward after them. The steward accused them of stealing the governor's precious silver divination cup. The brothers were horrified and denied the charge completely. They were so confident in their innocence that they agreed the one found with the cup should be executed. The steward searched their sacks, starting with the oldest and ending with the youngest. To everyone's shock and dismay, the silver cup was found in Benjamin's sack of grain. The brothers tore their clothes in despair and returned to the city. They fell on the ground before Joseph, who declared that Benjamin must now become his slave. Judah stepped forward and made a passionate plea for Benjamin's freedom. He offered to become a slave in Benjamin's place, not wanting to break his father's heart again. He explained how their father Jacob would die of grief if Benjamin did not return. His heartfelt speech showed a profound change from the selfish brother he once was. Seeing his brother's genuine remorse and change of heart, Joseph could no longer control his emotions. He ordered all his Egyptian attendants to leave the room immediately. Then, weeping loudly, he revealed his true identity to his stunned brothers. "I am Joseph," he cried out. "Is my father still alive?" They were too terrified to speak. He urged them to come closer and not be afraid. He told them not to be angry with themselves for selling him, for it was God's plan all along. He explained that God had sent him ahead of them to Egypt. His purpose was to save their lives and preserve their family during the terrible and widespread famine. He forgave them completely, showing incredible grace and mercy. He instructed them to hurry back to Canaan and bring their father, Jacob, and their entire families to Egypt. Pharaoh was pleased when he heard the news. He provided wagons and supplies for the journey, inviting Joseph's entire family to come and live in the best part of Egypt. Jacob eventually believed the news and journeyed to Egypt. He was joyfully reunited with his long-lost son. Joseph and the entire family was saved from starvation, settling in Goshen.